Today, we examine the wonders of getting old, like it or not. That's next on City Corner. Hi, I'm Steve Potter. Welcome to City Corner. Don Marsh has been a journalist for something like 55 years. Most recently, you know him as host of St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio. And we used to work together and see each other almost every day. Hi, Don. How are you?
Comrades in arms.
Is that what we are?
Well, that's what we were.
Well, I want to point out, in all fairness, that you are a little older than me. You know I'm going to give you a hard time.
That's all right. That's what this is all about.
I have to ask you, Don, coming of age, liver spots and all, that's the name of your book. Oh, I neglected to mention that. Coming of age, liver spots and all, a humorous look at the wonders of getting old. When did you decide you were old enough to start thinking about getting old?
I don't think I ever started. It just sort of happened. And actually, you were partly responsible for that. A couple of years ago,
I was?
we were talking. Yeah, you were writing a column for the Alton paper, and you had written a column about becoming 60 years of age.
Right.
Which you were at the time. You're a lot older.
Thanks for pointing out that I'm older than that now.
Anyway, it got me to thinking about this aging process because I was, 17 years older than you at that point. And I just began to wonder about what the heck was happening. I felt, mentally I felt fine, but the body was going to hell in a handbasket.
It's just not the body, too. Isn't it the way maybe the message we get from society or people that happen to be younger than us sometimes?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, they are to be admired when you look at the ads, you look at the television programs. There aren't too many television programs about older people. Mm-hmm. And when you do see them, basically they're being made fun of or being kind of different and not to be respected in most cases. There are some exceptions, but the youth reigns supreme.
Mm-hmm. Well, you take a humorous look. Now, it's not a joke book by any stretch of the imagination,
No.
but it is a humorous look at getting older. Is that the only way to approach it, you think?
Well, I think so. That's the way I'd like to think that I approach it. Getting old isn't fun, but it can be funny in some regards. You look at some of the things that older people do and the way they dress sometimes, for instance, and
Did you notice both our shirts have the same pattern? Am I reading?
That's to cover the stains.
Am I reading too much into this?
No, that's what that's all about. You wear dark clothes so the stains don't show.
Another disadvantage of getting old.
I mentioned to you earlier off the air that we did a program the other day with Stephen Sondheim,
right.
Who is just a pillar of the American theater. He's won 8 Tonys, 8 Oscars, and he goes on and on. He's 88 years old. He came into the studio wearing a stained golf shirt and old sweats that were full of stains and sneakers. I mean, that's kind of the old guy look anymore.
Right.
But this was a guy, who you think of him as elegant in a tuxedo and attending the parties. He looked like hell.
Yeah, that's kind of sad.
Yeah.
You say this is from a man's perspective. Do you think men and women look at getting old differently?
In some cases, I think pretty much the same, though. I mean, it's been my experience. My wife is a little younger 10 years younger than I am. But she complains about the same kind of the aches and the pains. I mean, that's when things are beginning to happen, when everything kind of hurts.
Well, Don, you've hosted St. Louis on the Air for how many years now?
13.
13 years,
Yeah.
something like that. That's really amazing. And I worked at the same place you did, St. Louis Public Radio, for a long time. I hosted Cityscape, which was their arts program, for something like 11 or 12 years. And after that went away, I sort of filled in for you once in a while, or I do segments about arts things. Mm-hmm. And even though I'm younger than you...
You keep rubbing that in.
Because I don't know too many people, Don, I can say that too.
Oh, really?
You knew this was coming,
wait,
didn't
you ain't seen nothing yet, Steve.
Where was I going with all that?
I don't know. You were talking about having done the arts programs, filling in.
Right. I used to think sometimes and no one told me this, but in my own mind, I thought, dealing with the arts, current things, trendy stuff, am I getting too old to do that? Did you ever have those self-doubts too?
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, and I guess this is part of the aging process. I mean, I can track it back to when I was younger. but it's hard to keep up with what is in fashion now for the young people, for instance. I mean, I'm not much into rap music. I don't know many of the big name stars. I don't know the songs that they're making popular.
I don't know any current TV shows.
Yeah, that sort of thing. But I do know and can remember very clearly who were the big stars in the 50s. I can still remember lyrics of the songs that they were singing in the 50s. So that's different. It's hard to kind of keep up with what's. But this has always been the case. You know, my father used to laugh at the music that I liked. I laughed at the music that he and my mother were listening to in the 20s. So it's just a generational thing, you know. And these kids today will be laughing at their kids and what they find amusing.
I used to laugh at big band music. I remember that
really?
distinctly.
Yeah, well.
And now.
But your parents didn't. They loved it.
No, I just saw some of the big, like Journey. I can't remember the groups. Just in the news the last few days, a couple of these lead singers, the groups that I grew up with, are turning. They're older than me now. They're turning 65 or something. It's really amazing. Okay. Can we talk numbers?
Yeah.
How old were you on your last birthday?
80. Wow. What's so
I,
wow?
I don't mean that
What's
that's
wow?
old, but I mean any even number to me is like a milestone, whether it's 30, 40, 50, 60. So was that a milestone for you?
Yeah, they're all milestones, man. At this age, what's the alternative?
I think I know.
Mortality is one of the things that we talk about in the book, and it's something to be certainly cognizant of.
Don, in your book, in your preface, you sort of give a test. I wonder if you would give me a test. And tell me the point of this test.
Point of the test is to determine whether or not you're old. There are 3 tests and 3 different groups of questions, and depending on how accurately you answer each group, you pretty well place how old you are.
All
so
right,
I do.
okay.
Imagine that. I just turned right to the page that we were talking about. Okay.
That's pretty good for an old person.
Okay. If you can answer these questions, let's see where you are.
All right.
Tojo. Who is Tojo?
I have no idea.
Really? Joe Welch.
Joe Welch?
Yeah.
Wasn't there a singer, Joe Walsh? I have no idea.
It might have been. Okay. Army McCarthy hearings. Tojo was the leader of Japan during World War II.
Okay.
Christine Jorgensen.
Oh, well, she was a transsexual tennis player?
She,
Or
well,
something
she was
like
pretty
that?
much, yes. She was the first sex change operation. She
I
went
think
to
that
Denmark.
was like when I was in high school or
Really?
70s?
50s, early, no, 50s.
Oh my
Definitely
gosh.
the 50s,
Okay, I was
yeah.
older than I thought, but I grew up knowing her name.
Fran Allison.
I have no idea.
Ever hear of Kukla, Fran, and Ollie?
Yes,
She was the Fran.
that was before my time, but yes.
Okay, 38th parallel.
I've heard of it. That's something to do
Shit,
with
it's
World
in-
War II?
It's in the news today. No. 38th parallel is what divides North and South Korea.
Oh.
And that's was
We
the
would have heard that a lot in
dividing
the Korean War then, yeah.
Yeah, and they're hearing it a lot now when they're talking about the 2 Koreas. Bruce Beamer.
I have no idea.
Really? He played the Lone Ranger on the radio. John L. Lewis,
John Lewis.
leader of the United Mine Workers Union, very, very active in the late 40s and 50s. Ted Mack. I'm surprised if you don't know.
Now wait, now Ted Mack I know I should know.
Yeah.
Did-
Ted Mack's original Amateur Hour.
Ted Mack
on the
Amateur Hour,
radio,
right.
Sure. Senor Wences,
Never heard of it.
really. On the old Ed Sullivan Show. He used to be on all the time. He had a little puppet. He moved it with his.
See, like
with
you were
his
probably in
hands.
high
That's
school and I was 6
Yeah.
years old or something like that, right?
Uh-huh.
That's why I don't quite have a
very
grasp.
unaware 6-year-old, I might say, too. What? Joe, and I can't even pronounce this, Bifsplk. It's spelled B-T-F-S-P-L-K.
I have no idea.
That was a character in the Little Abner comic strip who walked around. There was always a rain cloud over his head. He was just Mr. Unlucky. And Collier's Magazine.
Heard of it? I think it was sort of like a family magazine or something, or reading magazine or something.
It was a very popular magazine that basically went out of business in the 50s.
So according to your test, since I didn't...
You're not old.
Oh, well, you're
And
not
this
done
is,
yet.
you passed the test in being not old.
So I'm not old.
Right. We won't go through all of these, but if you remember Anatoly Dobrynin,
No.
Soviet ambassador to the United States in the 60s, Adam Clayton Powell,
Well, of course. From the Martin Luther King era when I was young in the 1960s.
he was a congressman from New York.
Right.
Yuri Gagarin,
Name rings a bell, but I couldn't put my finger on it.
first man in space. Charles Manson,
Well, yes.
okay, who doesn't know that? John Cameron Swayze.
Well, of course. dated his niece in high school.
Did he really? The Camel News Caravan. Hunter Thompson,
He was an author.
journalist, writer, right? My Lai,
The My Lai massacre in
Right.
Vietnam,
Hyannisport,
where the Kennedys hung out.
Dr. Strangelove.
That was a book and a movie.
Yeah, absolutely was. So that, and Bates Motel is the last one here.
Well, yeah, that's from the murder movie thing. Bates Motel.
Yeah.
What was that called?
Psycho.
Psycho.
Yeah. Okay, so there we are. See, that pretty much dates you as being not as old as I, but as old as you are.
Huh. Interesting. You talk about, the name of your book is Coming of Age, Liver Spots and All, and you even address that in your book.
Yeah. It's
The liver spots that
first
you noticed
chapter.
on your hand, I think.
Hand and arms, yeah.
I don't think I have any. If I have, I'm in denial. I haven't noticed any. When did you notice your first liver spot?
I can't pinpoint the date, but it was probably 10 years ago.
But a liver spot's a totally natural thing. It's nothing to be worried about, right?
No, but a lot of people think, it's the first sign of cancer. It's just, it is a very natural thing. And it has to do with exposure to the sun over a lifetime. Yeah, so, it's not much you can do about it. As I say in the book, there are ointments you can get and bleaches you can put on them. But if you do that, you're going to have little pink spots on your arms, and it makes you look like the creatures from
I can tell
where the
that-
wild things are.
I can tell that you're old now, Don, because you're talking about ointments.
God knows. What will we do?
Do
without
millennials ever talk about ointments?
Do I ever talk to the millennials? They don't want to talk to me.
You work with some, don't you? I mean, they're young people in the workplace these days.
Sure. Oh, there are plenty of them, yeah. But they don't want to talk. They talk to each other, but they don't talk to the old guys.
Millennials. Chapter 2 in your book, Coming of Age, Liver Spots and All, Chapter 2 is entitled Millennials, and I just want to read the first couple of sentences. Because millennials, you know who you are. They're young, 18 to 34, in their prime, with at least one dog and tattoos. Many live in a basement near you. Perhaps very neat, or perhaps very near, perhaps your basement.
Yeah. Well, a lot of young people, they come home from college or wherever, and they wind up living with their folks for a period of
But
time.
Don, I remember when I was one of those young folks that all the old people kind of gave a dirty look to. I had shoulder-length hair. Remember
Sure.
that? 1972 or something. Are the millennials really any different than I was when I was young, or you were when you were young? Is it different?
Probably not. I mean, I can't speak for that group, but I think, as I go on to say in that chapter, they have a very tough road ahead of them. They come out of college, for instance, with enormous amounts of debt. Jobs are very, very hard to find because there's still so many baby boomers out there who are holding good jobs.
Like
and
us.
yeah, like us, exactly like us, who are keeping them from climbing that ladder, so they're kind of stuck at a certain level. And let's face it, they are living in a world that we created for them. And
I
this
take
world
no
isn't-
responsibility in that.
Yeah, well, I wish we didn't. But you're not leaving them, a clean table.
One thing that, one thing that makes me feel old all the time is sort of my feelings about social media. It makes me realize I must be old, bah humbug social media. I was the last person I know to get on Facebook of any of my friends. And I use it mostly sort of for professional reasons, not so much to keep in touch with people. But I'm not a big fan of social media. Is that just an old thing?
I don't know. It may be. Certainly the young people are very much into it. And they're very adept at utilizing it. I mean, they can ride a bicycle and use two thumbs and be texting someone all at the same, in traffic, for crying out loud. They're very, very good at it. I use it, but I only use what I need to know. I don't go out and experiment with all the options there are out there for social media or for using the new technology. Keeping up with it is time consuming.
And when it comes to Facebook from you, I've never seen you do a selfie. I've never seen a photograph of your lunch.
No, we do see a lot of that. It's such a waste of time. That's the way I look at it. Maybe as you get older, you think time is more precious than someone who's younger.
I saw a report on one of the news shows within the last week or two. I wish I could give it correct attribute. But they went on to say that, like, the founder of Facebook is acknowledging that it's not good for people. And I may not be phrasing it exactly how he phrased it.
Well, I think in some cases it is. I think with the grandparents, for instance, the older generation is learning how to use social media basically because of the grandkids. If they're, not living in the same town or even the same country, it's an opportunity to use Skype or just email or whatever to stay in contact with the grandkids. And that's how most of them use social media.
Don, how did you start this book? Because you're writing a book about getting older, so it doesn't seem like to me that you'd go to the library and research this. It all must have come from within, so I'm just wondering how that all started for you.
Well, the idea started with our conversation 3 years ago.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And then I just began to think about it. I began to look at it in terms of some of what I thought were the humorous things about it, and trying to explain some of those things, like the liver spots, for instance. There's no real good reason for that. There are some theories, but some people think it's because you've got a liver problem.
When I wrote that newspaper article about turning 60 and being so old, did it make you feel bad since you're 18 years older than me? And I had this self-pity newspaper article, just like, mine was trying to be humorous too, but I was really crying.
Well, too bad. I've never felt bad about being old. As I say, the alternative just doesn't have any appeal at all. I feel good about having gotten this far. I hope there are still some more mountains to climb and that sort of thing. It's just that most of what I do anymore hurts, and that's the main thing.
You mean physically?
Physically, yeah, arthritis, things. I had to give up golf. My shoulders just wouldn't allow me to swing a golf club anymore. I really regret not being able to do that.
And were you like me? I always was very close to older people. I wasn't like some young people I knew, they didn't relate to old people, didn't like them. I always had, when I was a little kid, I had aunts in the 80s and 90s, and I was very close to them and talked to them, and so I sort of put them up on a pedestal and really enjoyed them. Did you have older mentors in your life?
Well, certainly I had parents and I had grandparents and people that I knew. My folks had an old folks home, a small nursing home. It was like a boutique nursing home.
Really?
Yeah. And so I grew up, and this is not the greatest environment for a young person, in an environment of older people. So I grew to understand and see a lot of things that wind up actually in the book. But I want to go back to the young people thing here, because one of the reasons I wanted to do this was to have younger people have a better understanding and appreciation of what their elders are going through. They tend to just kind of shun us off and put us in a corner, not realizing why we groan and grunt when we get out of a chair. And why we fear dying, why we fear falling, why we're concerned about dementia, why we're concerned that one of these days they're going to take the car away from us. And can you imagine that? I've been through that with my mother, my wife, and I. That's an awful thing to have to do. It's an even worse thing to have happen.
I remember when it happened to my grandmother at 91.
Yeah, that your independence is suddenly gone when that happens. Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
But young people should know that this is it's happening to their elders, and it's going to happen to them.
I know that you're older and you probably need a break now from all this talking. I'm just trying to be
Where's
rude
the
to you.
restroom?
I'm trying to be We're going to take a break. I'll show you where the restroom is, and we'll talk more about liver spots and other pleasant topics when we come back. I'm Steve Potter. Welcome back to City Corner. Coming of Age, Liver Spots and All. That's the title of Don Marsh's new book, a sort of humorous look at aging and so forth. And Don, before we get back to your book, I knew you for years on St. Louis Public Radio. You're still there. You host St. Louis on the Air every day, Monday through Friday, from noon until 1. And before that, I remember my first Don Marsh memory. And you think I'm young now. I got a late start in radio, so I was in my late 20s. And I worked my first job, full-time job, for 2 years in Kentucky, and then moved in with, you're talking about millennials living in basements. I lived on a very nice second floor of my grandmother's house when I moved to St. Louis because I thought I'd come make it in the big city. Of course, I had no job, so I got a Hula Hands that just opened in the Galleria, and I was waiting tables there, and every night I'd come home, and Don Marsh would be anchoring the news on television, and that's my first Don Marsh memory. Was that like the height of your career? I'm talking about, like, I guess that would have been like about 1987 or something like that.
Yeah, well, I was at Channel 2 from 1971 to 1994.
Wow.
So I was there for a long time. Then Channel 30 from, 95 to 98. So, yeah, it was almost 40 years.
And then you did radio after that. I know I was a weekend news anchor, KMOX, for a while, and not at the same time, but you hosted some of the programs on there for a while.
In 1994, yeah. I started in radio in 1960.
Where was that?
In Germany. I was I was a civilian correspondent with the American Forces Network, which served and serviced the servicemen and their families in Germany and Europe. It was a 150,000 clear channel, 150,000 watt clear channel radio station.
That goes like around the world, doesn't it?
We got feedback from the Philippines, from everywhere. Yeah.
Wow.
Very, very powerful, and it was a very difficult time. The Cold War was in full thrust. Berlin Wall went up when I was there. Cuban Missile Crisis, which had everybody scared to death when I was there. Soviet tanks on the border looking westward. You know, any moment they could have, if they had chosen to, come across and gone right to the English Channel. You know, probably in 24 to 48 hours. So it was a very, very tense time, but it was also a terrific time for a young reporter to be involved in covering the military, economic, and political world in that part of the world.
You know, people have always asked me, my full-time job's always been in radio, but I've done TV on and off for years and years. People always ask me, which do you like better, radio or TV? I bet you get the same question.
I do, and you know, I really like radio better, particularly with the way television news has gone.
And you don't see the liver spots.
You don't see, that's right, you're right. You don't have to wear a tie, and all that good stuff. Yeah, and you can do more, there's more opportunity for detail. And I like the whole idea of the theater of the mind is something that.
What were you going to say about local news? Because I bet I'm agreeing with what I think you're going to say.
Well, I think that back in the era when I was involved in it, it was a little more responsible than it is now. We looked at things that were actually news stories. Today, I'm so dismayed. You turn it on, your first 10 minutes is just crimes, shootings, you know, crime scene tape, and then you have a little hit of weather, then you come back and have, you know, maybe a feature, then you have the full weather, and then you go to sports, and then you say goodbye.
I just got to jump in there. Yeah. When after my first radio job, I told you, back when I first saw you on TV in the mid-'80s, I had moved to St. Louis, which was a big market, from Richmond, Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky area, where I was a news anchor at a radio station. But I remember when I wanted to break into St. Louis, and I came here with 2 years' experience, and I was pretty good. People wouldn't even talk to me because I didn't have experience. Isn't that 100% different than it is now?
Yeah, I mean, just take a look. It speaks
you
for
can
itself.
You can get a job on St. Louis TV right out of college.
Yeah, because they don't have to pay you. The problem there is that they're only there for a couple of years and then they move on someplace else and they bring in another crowd and they have no real opportunity to learn the players, the market, you know, what the news is and how things work here.
Don, do you ever worry about sounding like a grumpy old guy? Because the two of us all sound like that all of a sudden.
Oh, I'm sure that's the way it would be interpreted by other people. Every generation does. They look back and say, well, that's the way we did it. It's not the way we did it. We did it better.
Well, you may be old, but you're still a poet at heart.
You're right. Well, I like poetry.
And you have a little poetry in your book.
Yeah, I'll read it if you like. We talked earlier about how younger people look at the older generation. And
go ahead. I'll brace myself. Go ahead, read it.
Yeah, well, I don't think you need to brace yourself, but I'll just preface it by saying I write in the book that I can remember World War II. If you remember watching Saving Private Ryan, the movie, the first minute or so of that movie with the invasion in Normandy Beach and what have you. That's all part of what I was thinking when I wrote this. And I've remembered reading famous authors who have written about the war. So this is what I wrote. I said, do you ever wonder how you would stand up under fire? Ever made fun of an old man or a woman walking down the street, he in his shorts and long black socks, she in wrinkled stockings slipping down her legs? Maybe there's too much hair growing out of his ears and her chin. Maybe they couldn't hear or see too well. Talking to themselves? Could be. Comic, right? Time to remember who they are and who they were. They were there at Omaha Beach or Pork Chop Hill or Hue, maybe even in the Brooklyn Naval Yard building the battleship Missouri. Wherever, they were there contributing, and we are here now and speaking English, not German, not Japanese. We're here because that old guy or old gal stormed the beach or danced with a guy who died tomorrow. Everyone should remember why we should have respect for that old fellow holding up the line in the post office or the woman cramming 13 items into the 12-item express lane at the local supermarket. Next time that makes you mad, think about who they are and what they did before those who are laughing were born.
That's good. You know, I got my flu shot yesterday. I went to Walgreens and had to stand in a line. And I remember, this happened yesterday. I looked around and thought, these people are old. So it's still on my mind when I see people out, who's older than me?
Well, you know, the trick is to recognize it and be aware of it, as we have to be. I mean, it's an inevitable process. But don't resent it, and don't resent the people who are older.
Don, your book is Coming of Age, Liver Spots and All, a humorous look at the wonders of getting old. And it is a great book, and it's humorous, until I got to the last chapter. And I have to tell you, and we just have a couple minutes left, so we won't be dwelling on this, but I have to tell you, it really kind of touched my heart because you dealt with mortality and your own, and it was not a joke.
No, it wasn't. One of the disadvantages of aging, or of humanity, I guess, is health issues. And I had a scare. I had a colonoscopy, and it showed some bad stuff down in that particular area, and it had to be dealt with. And it was, and I had some choices to make as to how it would be dealt with. The odds were more in my favor to take very extreme measures and less so to kind of let nature take its course and medication and what have you. I chose the long shot, and it paid off, I'm happy to say. Otherwise, I don't think we'd be here talking now.
Well, you look great.
Well, thank you.
And
So
you're
do
having
you.
fun, and you've got the perfect job, and you know, a couple hours a week, and you're on the radio, and is it all good?
It's great. It's invigorating. It's challenging, and gives me a reason to get up and get moving every day.
Don't you know a lot of people my age and your age that don't laugh about it like you and I do? I'm just wondering what advice you'd have for other people aging that don't see the humor in it.
Don't give up. Try to find humor in it, and you know, have something to do every day. Keep the mind active and keep the body going. And you know, you can't do much about the aches or pains. They're going to stay there, but just overcome them.
Well, Don, I love your book, Coming of Age, Liver Spots and All, and I know you'll be along for a lot. You're going to get a lot more liver spots before you're done. Does that make you feel better?
I don't have far to go.
Don, it's great. I've enjoyed working with you over the years, and thanks for coming and sharing the book with us today.
And thank you for talking about it.
And
I appreciate that, Steve.
You bet. And we'll have information on how to get a copy, and this would be a great gift for someone over 40, probably. So I'm Steve Potter. Thanks for watching today, and I hope you join us on City Corner next time. Bye.